A new trade development out of Washington is drawing attention across global markets, as the Trump administration launches a fresh round of tariff investigations, targeting multiple countries. But in a notable twist, Canada has not been included in the list, at least for now. The announcement came Wednesday, when officials confirmed that the United States is opening trade investigations under Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974. This legal tool has historically been used by U.S. administrations to challenge foreign trade practices that they believe harm American industries. The move follows a recent Supreme Court decision that struck down earlier attempts by President Donald Trump to reshape global trade policies through tariffs. After that legal setback, the administration appears to be rebuilding its strategy, this time through a series of targeted investigations that could eventually lead to new tariffs. According to the U.S. Trade Representative's Office, the investigations will focus on several economies across Asia and Europe. Countries listed include China, Japan, India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, South Korea, Taiwan, and Thailand. In addition, nations such as Indonesia, Malaysia, and Cambodia are also under scrutiny. Beyond Asia, several European economies are also included. The European Union as a bloc is being investigated, along with Switzerland and Norway. Singapore is also on the list, making the investigation one of the broadest trade reviews launched in recent years. One country that stands out for its absence from the list is Canada. Despite ongoing trade tensions in North America and long-standing debates about trade balances between the two countries, Canada was not included in the initial wave of investigations. Mexico, however, was included, placing one of the United States' closest trading partners directly under review. This distinction has sparked speculation among analysts and trade experts. Some believe the decision may reflect the deep economic integration between the United States and Canada, particularly in the energy sector. Canada's trade surplus with the United States is largely driven by American demand for Canadian oil. The United States imports significant volumes of crude oil from Canada, which naturally creates a trade imbalance when measured purely in dollar terms. But many economists argue that this imbalance does not necessarily represent a traditional trade problem. Instead, it reflects the geographic and economic reality of North American energy markets. Still, the White House has not ruled out the possibility that Canada could face investigations in the future. When asked whether Canada might eventually be added to the list of countries under review, the White House did not immediately respond. That silence has left room for speculation about whether the current exemption is temporary or part of a longer-term strategic decision. Meanwhile, officials from the Office of the United States Trade Representative emphasized that the investigations are part of a broader effort to protect American industry. In a statement released alongside the announcement, U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said the United States will no longer allow its industrial base to be weakened by unfair trade practices. Greer stated that the administration's goal is to ensure American workers and manufacturers are not disadvantaged in the global marketplace. According to the statement, the United States intends to use all available tools to defend domestic production and strengthen economic security. Section 301 investigations are a powerful mechanism within U.S. trade law. If the government determines that another country's policies unfairly harm American businesses, the administration can impose tariffs or other trade restrictions in response. The process typically involves months of investigation, consultation, and economic analysis before any final decision is made. Because of that timeline, the newly announced investigations may not produce immediate policy changes. However, they could eventually reshape trade relationships between the United States and many of its major economic partners. For now, Canada appears to be outside the immediate scope of the administration's new trade push. But the uncertainty surrounding future investigations means the situation could still evolve. Global markets, policymakers, and trade analysts will be watching closely to see whether Canada remains outside the investigation list or becomes part of the next phase of the administration's trade strategy. While Canada's absence from the investigation list may appear reassuring on the surface, trade experts caution that the situation could still shift in the months ahead. Section 301 investigations often serve as a first step in a broader strategy that can expand as economic and political conditions evolve. In previous administrations, similar investigations have sometimes started with a limited number of countries, before widening to include additional trading partners. Because of that precedent, analysts say Canada's current exclusion does not necessarily guarantee long-term immunity from potential trade scrutiny. For now, however, the focus remains on the countries already named in the investigation. Many of these economies play major roles in global manufacturing and supply chains. Nations such as China, Vietnam, Thailand, and Malaysia have become central hubs for electronics, textiles, machinery, and consumer goods that flow into the American market. The European Union and Japan also represent some of the United States' largest trading partners, meaning any policy changes emerging from these investigations could have far-reaching effects across global commerce. If tariffs are eventually imposed, companies that rely on imported materials and products could face rising costs. Those increases sometimes ripple through supply chains, eventually affecting prices for businesses and consumers. At the same time, supporters of the investigation argue that stronger trade enforcement is necessary to protect domestic manufacturing and ensure fair competition. Over the past several decades, the United States has experienced a steady shift in its industrial landscape. Many manufacturing jobs have moved overseas as companies pursued lower production costs. In other countries, some policymakers believe stronger trade enforcement, including tariffs, can encourage companies to invest more heavily in American production. That argument has been a central theme in Donald Trump's economic messaging. During both his presidency and political campaigns, Trump has repeatedly emphasized the importance of rebuilding the American industrial base and reducing reliance on foreign manufacturing. The latest round of investigations appears to reflect that broader strategy. By using Section 301 reviews, the administration can examine whether certain trade practices, such as subsidies, regulatory barriers, or market restrictions, disadvantage American companies competing internationally. If such practices are identified, tariffs could be introduced as a response designed to rebalance trade conditions. However, critics warn that aggressive tariff policies can also carry risks. Some economists argue that tariffs may trigger retaliatory measures from other countries. When that happens, U.S. exports can face new barriers in foreign markets, potentially harming American industries that rely heavily on international customers. Agriculture, technology, and manufacturing sectors have all experienced the impact of such trade tensions in the past. Because of these competing perspectives, global trade policy often becomes one of the most closely watched areas of economic decision-making. For Canada, the current situation reflects the complicated nature of its economic relationship with the United States. The two countries share one of the largest trading relationships in the world. Every day, billions of dollars in goods and services move across the U.S.-Canada border, supported by deeply integrated supply chains in sectors such as energy, automotive manufacturing, and agriculture. Energy trade, in particular, plays a major role in shaping the overall trade balance between the two nations. Canada remains the largest supplier of crude oil to the United States, sending millions of barrels per day across the border through pipelines and rail networks. Because oil is a high-value commodity, these imports significantly influence the overall trade figures. As a result, Canada often shows a trade surplus when measured in simple import-export statistics. But many analysts point out that this surplus largely reflects the structure of North American energy markets rather than traditional trade imbalances. Even so, trade relationships can quickly become political issues, especially during periods of economic uncertainty or shifting global alliances. For now, the Trump administration's latest investigation signals a renewed focus on trade enforcement and industrial policy. While Canada is not currently included in the review, the broader direction of U.S. trade strategy suggests that global trade relationships will remain under close examination. As the investigation process unfolds, businesses, governments, and financial markets around the world will be watching carefully. The outcome could influence tariffs, supply chains, and economic partnerships for years to come.